Hey everybody, video here for you today. We're going to tack one on to my Ancient America series, and this is one of the favorite ones I've done in my series, just because it's lost history. A lot of these places are written about. You can find stuff written about them. Today, this is totally lost history. Let's go down to Cumberland County, Tennessee here. This is E.G. Wilson Road. This little valley here was home of Greenberry Wilson and his wife Temperance in the late 1700s. There's quite a story to tell here. Lost history, let's get to it. This video came from one mention of Greenberry Wilson's name in an article, and I just got curious. And what I found, I was lucky or something here. But this is a look at the home he built in 1797 with his wife, Temperance. Her name was Temperance Bradshaw. And here is a little more recent look at the home. Some restoration work done here, obviously. The house is right down here. And right up in this area is the family cemetery, and it almost looks like it's built up on a mound here, but a family cemetery. And we'll get back to this property towards the end of the video. Pretty interesting. But Greenberry Wilson served as a soldier in the Revolutionary War. And Greenberry Wilson was the first white settler buried in Cumberland County. I believe I read that. I started looking into this story just because of some messages I had received from some people about caves in Tennessee, so I looked into it. This is an article from the Paris Review coming from 2011. Over the past few decades in Tennessee, archaeologists have unearthed an elaborate cave art tradition thousands of years old. The pictures are found in dark zone sites, places where the Native American people who made the artwork did so at personal risk, crawling meters or in some cases miles underground with cane torches. A pair of local hobby cavers, friends who worked for the U.S. Forest Service, found the first of these sites in 1979. They had been exploring an old root cellar and wriggled up into a higher passage. The walls were covered in a thin layer of clay sediment, left there during long ago floods and maintained by the cave's unchanging temperature and humidity. They noticed artwork on the wall. The men debated even saying anything, but the older of the men was a student of local history. He knew some of those images from looking at drawings of pots and shell ornaments that emerged from fields around there. Birdmen, a dancing warrior figure, a snake with horns. Here were naturalistic animals too, an owl and a turtle. Some of the pictures seem to have been first made, then ritually mutilated in some way, stabbed or beaten with a stick. That was the discovery of Mud Glyph Cave, which was reported all over the world and spawned a book and a National Geographic article. Some of the artwork is a little bit earlier than 1,000 years ago, and there's still a question to how old it really is. There survives a record of the first white people ever to see this place. In 1905, a local inhabitant came up with a journal of his great-grandfather, one of the original party who'd settled in the valley in the 1790s, and he wrote it up for a paper. They journeyed from Maryland, men, women, and children, with the hopes of forming a tiny utopia here, a community that would have its own laws. Their leader was a man named Greenberry Wilson. The reason we know there was an 18th century journal at all, that this descendant didn't invent the whole thing, is that he has the settlers say the cave was full of mummies, and it was full of skeletons. There's no other way he could have known that in 1905, because this place wasn't rediscovered until 1979. And this is what it says in the journal coming from over 220 years ago. We prepare a good torchlight and pass around to the right of the pond on a ledge or table of rock. There we enter a hallway 10 or 12 feet wide. We travel this for 50 or 60 feet, and the hall begins to expand. Here, jutting from the walls, are tables or shelves covered with skeletons of vast proportions belonging to some past age of the world. The burials are still in there, covered with sediment that got washed through the karst when farmers started clearing the uplands around 1800. University of Tennessee excavators found them out on the ledges right where the journal said, silted over. The archaeologists left them alone once they saw the bones peeking through the mud. All the jewelry and other items for the afterworld had probably been stolen. The little band of settlers had included a few eager looters. When they got done seeing the cave, that day they tore open the Indian mound 2 miles farther down the valley. The party began in the center of the mound and secured many relics. Now here, Charles Faulkner from the University of Tennessee wrote a book on the cave art of the area. Many, many caves, including Mud Glyph Cave, were included. Now here is some art from Mud Glyph Cave. Birdman or falcon dancer. And here's his head. He's wearing something here. He has a gorget across his chest and bracelets on his arms and wrists. Now here are some kind of rough drawings of the artwork found in Mud Glyph Cave and nearby caves. You see that spiral right there, E, and then D right there. I think D is Orion. F through J, these bottom 5 represent the rock art found in Mud Glyph Cave. The one on the right there, the one we looked at already. Now on the left there is a birdman holding up a couple maces. I think that those are some ceremonial objects. The dating here, what they did is they tried to date some charcoal and soot in the area, but they had dates that came back maybe 1,000 years ago, and then other dates maybe 1,500 years ago, and then maybe back roughly 2,000 years ago. But it says, it is important to remember that in none of these caves, including Mud Glyph, was this charcoal directly associated with these drawings. Thus, it could be reasonably argued that the activity associated with the deposition of the torch charcoal had nothing to do with the drawing of the glyphs. Here's the book by Mr. Faulkner, The Prehistoric Native American Art of Mud Glyph Cave. And here's that image of the bird here that was found in the cave near the other art. Here's some art found in a cave nearby. And is he hunting, or is that Orion? Look at the posture here of this guy. Arm out front, right arm back, extended, look like he's striding. Does this posture here on the left look any different than this posture here on the ancient cave art? I don't think so. Here are some more images from Mud Glyph Cave. Also a red serpent found in here with horns. And here is some other rock art from a nearby cave. Here is one depicting dogs or jackals. And some of this, they say, goes back 6,000 years, so dating, pretty tough to do. Now this depiction here, this may be also a depiction of Orion, possibly, but this certainly reminds me of my Mexico cave, the Olmec video I made last week. Certainly some interesting rock art in Mud Glyph Cave and also surrounding caves. Here is one from a cave right nearby, and there are so many caves that they don't even have names. They're called Unnamed Cave 1, Unnamed Cave 5. But here, that's an interesting depiction. How old is it? Well, that's a good question to ask. I searched YouTube for a video on Mud Glyph Cave. I could not find one. Here is a video titled Tennessee Mud Glyphs. I don't think this is from Mud Glyph Cave itself, but it must be pretty similar. And they found ancient rock garden here, and I thought this was a pretty cool video. But the Mud Glyph Cave story, I found that very interesting. The report of mummies, just skeletons that got kind of covered by sediment over time. And that was verified. And it seems their artifacts, their jewelry, goods were taken. It's a story we have heard before. So I thought that was really interesting. A guy 225 years ago leading an expedition into a cave and finding some pretty interesting stuff. So I thought I'd just look into this Greenberry Wilson guy. Interesting name. See if there was anything more to the story. Well, there was. Now, there was only 3 or 4 stories on websites I could find with Greenberry Wilson's name in it, but this one caught my eye immediately. A National Register of Historic Places register form for the Greenberry Wilson property. Let's just read. Now, the first 3 pages of this just describe the house and the property itself, so I'm thinking this is why the historical register form was filled out. Historical house here coming from the 1700s. But then I read on, it says, and this caught my eye first, also on the property is the family cemetery. The cemetery is located on the hill overlooking the home place at the top of the northern field. Most of the stone markers are simple stones topped by a sheep or a Bible. There is one grave that is a stone box with a large flat stone for a top. And when I read that, and I know I've read many stories in this region of the ancient United States that there was stone box graves, but would a person 200 years ago been buried in a stone grave with a big flat stone top? That sounds more like a sarcophagus than a grave coming from a few hundred years ago. So that caught my eye. That seemed weird. But why did they choose this area particularly? Well, is this the reason? They reportedly found mounds of earth 15 and 20 feet high and 75 or 100 yards around with the base made of stone. The mounds were full of human bones, ancient pottery, Indian arrowheads, and many other curious implements. These mounds still exist on the property adjacent to the Greenberry Wilson home place property. So not only did Greenberry Wilson lead the expedition to Mud Glyph Cave, he also has mounds on his property. They are still here today. Really? I had never heard of this site. I had never heard of mounds here. And it's not on any list or anything. And that historical register document, well, I couldn't find it on a normal list of historical places like usual. Just seemed a little weird. I did find the house on the list of historical records, but not the mounds themselves. And the mounds appear to be the much more important stories, mounds coming from a little over 2,000 years ago, probably. Those seem a little more historical than a house from 1797, but that is what is under the historical records of this place, the significance of the place. Now, here's a video I found last night, Indian burial mounds in Tennessee, and this was made about 4 months ago. 36 views, and it's a Creative Commons video. Anybody can use it. And I'm going to leave the link below, but I really appreciated finding this. And this has to do with the Greenberry Wilson mounds. The video is narrated, and it's only a minute long, but it has a pic of this little plaque here. It says the Greenberry Wilson mounds. These stone mounds overlooking Wilson Branch comprise 2 or 3 prehistoric mounds on the Greenberry Wilson property. Stone mounds. All 3 are constructed out of locally available limestone slabs, and based on their shape and construction style, likely would date to the later portion of the Woodland period, roughly 1000 BC to 1000 AD. The beginning of the woodland culture in the upper Sequatchie Valley and throughout Tennessee is identified by the appearance of specific traits, including the construction of ceremonial mounds, the establishment of permanent villages, intensive cultivation of crops, and the manufacture of pottery vessels. Mounds like those at the Greenberry Wilson site were constructed for a variety of purposes, including as ceremonial performance spaces and for funerary monuments. The area surrounding the mounds would have served as the main settlement for woodland occupation of the site. However, the stream terraces along the Wilson Branch were also occupied throughout the entire span of the prehistoric period. Various artifacts recovered from the area date to at least 9,000 BC, shortly after the end of the Ice Age, and coinciding with the arrival of the first people in the region. The stone mounds and artifacts at the Greenberry Wilson site reflect the incredibly rich prehistory of both the property and the Sequatchie Valley. Once again, I will leave the link for this video below, but the guy comes across one of these stone mounds on the property. I've talked about stone mounds, haven't shown too many of them. Did show the stone mounds from up in Quebec from Steve's property up there. But stone mounds, Tennessee, no record of this on any official mound group. Seems to be on private property and has been totally lost to history. That certainly proves you never know what you're going to find. But I couldn't locate exactly where the mounds are here. The trees kind of get in the way. But right over this hill from the property, there's this huge hill here. And I noticed right up on top of it, there's probably a stone mound right up here. A few stone mounds that I have done in my Ancient America series were on top of large hills or mounds. And that appears to be one right there. But the story of Greenberry Wilson, that was a good one to do. A little curiosity, a little research, found some lost history, stone mounds, pretty mysterious cave in Tennessee. That was fun to do. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very nice day.